Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report and a company update from Headwater Gold, chatting with the president and CEO Caleb Stroup. The company is traded on the CSE under the symbol HWG and the OTCQB under the symbol HWAUF. A lot for us to cover here, Caleb. We have news from the Spring Peak project, where Newmont has selected to advance that project to the Stage 2 earn-in. That encompasses, I believe, about $40 million spend over the next 4 years. Also have news from the Loadstar project, where you've commenced drilling and received a permit, all in pretty short order. You also signed that letter of intent with OceanaGold for the exploration on 3 projects in Nevada, and some news out of the Crane Creek project. Yes, a lot to get into. Let's start with Spring Peak. The most recent news that came out just today was that that project was selected by the government for the Fast 41 permitting process. But there was also that news from earlier where Newmont had elected to bring that into the Stage 2 earn-in. So let's start here with Spring Peak. Caleb, bring us up to speed. All the developments at that Spring Peak project, please.
Yeah, so as you say, it's certainly been a busy period for the company and a lot of news in the last few weeks. And I think you set it up well in the different categories there. So starting with Spring Peak, one of the most significant recent events there is Newmont's election to continue into Stage 2 of the earn-in agreement. So through Stage 2, they'll now be looking to increase their partner interest in the project from 51% to 65% by spending 40 million US over the next 3 years. And along with that, just today we announced that the permit expansion that we're contemplating at Spring Peak to really kick off this big Stage 2 program was elected into the Fast 41 program by the federal government. So this is a program that's meant to establish very clear and transparent timelines to move the permitting along at a rate which it's supposed to move. So we're just thrilled to be part of that and have this agreement with Newmont going into Stage 2 in place for when that process concludes, and are looking forward to a real busy year out there next year.
Well, Caleb, congrats to the team on both the fast tracking of the permitting and the clear guidelines part of that program, but also seeing the largest gold producer on the planet moving forward with phase 2. For people that are not familiar with this project, we probably should remind people why Newmont is interested and why the government is interested in fast tracking this project. So just remind people on Spring Peak what the attraction is.
Yeah, well, it's one of these big historic districts in Nevada that we see a ton of potential in. There's something like 5 million ounces of historic endowment in this relatively small area that we're working in. Most of that was produced in the 1800s, in the old days, basically the high-grade veins that were sticking out of the ground. And what we're pursuing with Newmont is, new, tier 1 type discoveries more broadly in the district, largely under barren alteration or even post-mineral cover. But we think the geology is extremely conducive to making new discoveries out there. Perhaps not dissimilar to what AngloGold has done down in Beatty at the Arthur Project, finding a massive deposit under what, was known about for a while, but was barren alteration at surface. This is a pretty similar setup. And yeah, clearly Newmont sees at least the potential for a Newmont size exploration target out here. And that's what we're driving for.
What is this program going to look like, and how significant is that permit being fast tracked? That obviously gives Newmont probably more motivation to go after this project, but give us a lay of the land of what we can expect here over this, not 4 years, but near term.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the next program there that we have lined out is really a property-wide expansion off of the success that we have had to date with the last couple of drill programs, where we discovered blind high-grade veins at depth in the sort of the core of the Spring Peak target area. And these veins and mineralized zones remain open in all directions. So the significance of this permit in this Fast 41 process is that we now have some clarity into the timeline of what it's going to take to move those permits forward and allow us to actually chase this thing, not at a sort of kilometer, single kilometer scale or 100-meter offsets, but, over multiple kilometers with, I think this proposed permit has 266 proposed drill sites over, several kilometers of strike length that'll really allow us to, chase this thing wherever the geology tells us it looks like it's going. And that'll be a pretty aggressive program, is my expectation based on that 40 million US over the next 3-year number.
Well, and Caleb, this also brings in the larger discussion with Newmont and probably the same thing with Oceana, just the ability to have these different staged earn-ins on projects going from stage one to stage two. Remind people what stage three would look like if you get to that point. And also, let's bring into the equation that Headwater remains the operator. So this also helps you bringing in some capital to the company and have boots on the ground experience with these projects.
Yeah, no, that's correct. So, that's a core piece of our business model is we'd like to operate at least a number of the partner-funded projects. That gives us a couple of things, close direction to the technical programs that are happening on the ground. And we collect a management fee, a 10% management fee on all the expenditures. So that helps fund in part or in whole some years our corporate overhead while allowing us to, continue to execute our business model elsewhere in the portfolio. So it's a really great structure from my perspective. And on the stage three, so yeah, we're now in stage two, and if they complete that stage two, they'll have the ability to get an additional 10% interest in the project, up to 75%, by completing a pre-feasibility study and granting Headwater a 2% NSR on all the ground that we staked in the property that's unencumbered by royalties, which is the vast majority of it. So you get a carried 25% interest plus a 2% NSR in a Newmont size PFS stage project in a success scenario.
So before we leave what's going on with Newmont, Spring Peak clearly being a focus as they're now in stage two. Any other projects that you can update us on that Newmont has under this exploration agreement that could be moving forward?
Yeah, so in that same district, the broader Aurora district in Nevada, on the north end of the district, we also have another project called Loadstar that's in a separate earn-in agreement with Newmont, very similar structure. And this one came in some period of time after the original one, so it hasn't been drilled yet. And we just kicked off our Maiden drill program out there, announced in the last few weeks, both the receipt of a drill permit out there, and basically started drilling immediately. So that program has kicked off, and that's one of the more exciting things in the portfolio right now, from my perspective, is the geology at surface at Loadstar is very, very similar to the geology above the discovery we made at Spring Peak. And, given what we know about this broader district now, we're pretty excited about this Zodiac target that we're drilling into right now.
Okay, Caleb. And so when we look at this Loadstar deal, it looks like you're doing 3,500 meters of drilling. Again, that's a mix of core and RC, about 10 to 15 holes. But as you mentioned, you're going after that Zodiac-Sinister Ridge target. So tell us why the team's excited about that target.
Yeah, so it's very similar to the sinter at Spring Peak, under which we made a high-grade vein discovery. There's a preserved sinter deposit here, which is basically the top of a extinct hot spring system that we think, has a high probability of being fed by epithermal veins at depth. And, the character of the sinter and the surrounding alteration is, if anything, looks more encouraging than the Spring Peak Center, in that it's got elevated trace elements even beyond what we see at Spring Peak, lots of brecciation and oxidation and cross-cutting veining, a little bit of anomalous gold at surface, which is not present at Spring Peak, despite, there being, ounce plus gold veins directly underneath it at, maybe 150 meters depth. There is no gold at surface at Spring Peak. This does have a little bit of gold, and we think we understand the geology pretty well. And it's simply a matter now of drilling those 10 to 15 holes in 3,500 meters and testing what we think is the feeder structure to this. So that's what we're up and running, doing right now.
So Caleb, I always ask this question when we're hearing about early stage drill programs and what you could expect from that and what you would consider a success. Would this be high grade, narrow width, or would this be long widths over potentially lower grades? Or obviously better, high grade over long widths, but talk to us about what would be considered a success in terms of what you're expecting.
Yeah, certainly both are possible, but really what we're targeting and expecting is those high grade individual veins. So, we're looking for high-grade veins on the order of 1 to 5 meters of, or something 10 to 20 grams is really the target from an initial program's perspective. Obviously, with epithermal veins like this, your first program, you're just kind of scratching the surface and demonstrating the proof of concept and then using that to vector in. So any indications of high-grade veins at depth underneath this thing will be very encouraging. But, the upside there is, definitely, could be meaningful widths of very meaningful grades.
Well, we'll definitely keep tabs on how things go at Loadstar. Exciting to see some drilling planned for that. And then I guess we should touch on, we discussed this last time when we chatted, Caleb, but you've finally inked the deal with OceanaGold where they can acquire an option on 75% interest in the TG, Jake Creek, and Hot Creek projects in Nevada by spending up to 65 million US and completing some pre-feasibility studies, some PFSs. So walk us through this deal again for people that maybe missed it with OceanaGold.
Yeah, so this is the most recent partner transaction the company's done in the portfolio. There are 3 projects in northern Nevada that we've now put into earn-in partnerships with OceanaGold. The LOI was announced a couple of months ago, and just a few days ago, we announced the closing of those definitive agreements, along with our intentions to mobilize and kick off drilling immediately at one of the projects at TJ. So these are very similar to the structure of the Newmont earn-in agreements that we already kind of walked through, but basically gives them an option to get all the way up to 75% interest by spending a combined 65 million US on the projects and deliver a pre-feasibility study as well to get to that 75% number. There's also a royalty component that comes back to Headwater, 1% NSR on top of that. So again, very similar, carried 25% interest to pre-feasibility plus a royalty is the upside for Headwater shareholders without having to suffer dilution.
So a little more information on that TJ project. What is being drilled? Give us an understanding of the target and the work that you've done to build up that.
Yeah, so this is another really exciting one, and in a lot of ways, very similar to Spring Peak and Loadstar geologically. There's a quite large sinter exposure up there, again, the very top of an epithermal system, and hasn't been tested at depth. We took the first crack at it last year with a pretty limited RC scout program. We drilled 4 holes, pretty wide space holes, which were the first holes really testing this thing, and hit broad intervals of anomalous gold and much more intense alteration than we really had expected, to be honest. But we didn't hit that high grade component. We still think we're too high in the system. And what needs to be done now is deeper core drilling. And that was the rationale to bring in OceanaGold to help us fund that. So we're going to be drilling something like 5 core holes into the main target structure underneath the sinter deposit and testing that for high-grade veins at depth, very similar to what we're doing at Loadstar.
Well, Caleb, you really have a lot going on as a company, not just the projects with Newmont, but now all these projects with OceanaGold, these different option agreements, lots of drilling planned for all of these projects. But wait, there's more. You still have the news from September 8th we never got to on Crane Creek, where you had done some initial surveys, the radiometric surveys, the ground gravity survey. So you're setting up the drill targets. Now, this project is in western Idaho, but you now have some optionality here where you've got the drill permits back in. So is this a situation where you'd rather drill it yourself because you still have the hybrid model at Headwater where you can drill some projects on your own, or is this one where you're looking on bringing in a partner?
Yeah, so that is something we're still evaluating. I mean, Crane Creek is one of about a half a dozen projects that are 100% owned, and we have a tremendous amount of optionality with. Like all the projects in that part of the portfolio, the goal really is to get those up to the drill stage, do the targeting work required to really see what the exploration picture and program looks like there. And at Crane Creek, we've done that, and we've just announced that we got the drill permits to allow testing that first program. And so now we're weighing our options. We'll end the year with something like $2.5 to $3 million and have some capacity to do that. But there's also been quite a bit of potential partner interest on the broader portfolio. So we're weighing our options overall, and we have no shortage of activity in the short term, as we described. We've got things going on in different parts of Nevada, and are basically playing this by ear at present. But the key is we've got it all teed up and ready to go, and we can make those decisions relatively quickly.
So tying in that cash at year end, we have talked about it a couple of times with a couple other guests and the analysts on the show, but you did close a private placement back in August that was led by Rick Rule, Jeff Phillips, and included Centerra Gold. It was $1 million fundraise, but look, those guys have even been on the show talking about that deal. So, Caleb, wrap us up then. Summarize it really. What news should we be expecting here in the near term, let's say through the end of the year?
Well, yeah, so we've just described two drill programs that have either just kicked off or are kicking off as we speak at Loadstar and TJ. And those are real high impact programs that we expect, the first assays to come out in the next few months, and a lot of potential upside there. With the greater OceanaGold transaction, there's also a couple of more projects included in there that we're putting together programs and kicking off in Q4 too. So we'll be announcing some more details on that as well. And on top of that, there's always the potential for new partnerships coming into the portfolio, as well as self-funded drill programs that we elect to do, and new projects coming in as well. We've been pretty successful at partnering on our existing projects, and in the background have continued a pretty aggressive program of target generation work, that continues to build out the portfolio. So on really all fronts in the business model, I think there's, a good potential to see continued growth in the company.
All right, Caleb, thank you very much for this update. Again, Caleb Stroup, President and CEO of Headwater Gold. Click the link in the show notes to visit the company's website and read over all the news we just recapped. Feel free to send us any questions you have for Caleb. We'll get him to address those and potentially even talk about those on future calls. Caleb, thank you very much for this update. There is a lot here. We'll have you back on the show in the near term.
All right. Thanks a lot, gents.